In the last episode, I shared how success can quietly become a birdcage. But once we see it, you can't unsee it. Welcome to the Knowing Moments. I'm your host, Joy Chick. If you're new here, please subscribe and follow us. This is a space where we explore the quiet inflection points in life and career, the moments when something shifts internally before clarity and change follow. But recognizing the cage is only the beginning. The hardest question is, if I step outside of it, who am I now? I want to go back to the very beginning of my sabbatical, my trip to Antarctica. And some of you may ask, why Antarctica? The simple answer is, I love travel. I love experiencing new places, history, culture, food, all of it. Antarctica was the last continent on my bucket list, a place people described as magical. But there were two problems. I don't like the cold, and I don't like cruises. So for years, it stayed on the list until the start of my sabbatical. And I remember telling myself, let's just get this one done and check the box. It took us over 2 days to get there, from Seattle to Buenos Aires and then to Ushuaia, before finally boarding the ship. National Geographic Endurance. As we stepped on board, went through the safety drills, it finally started to feel real. We were actually going to Antarctica, a continent with no native land animals, and a place so remote that less than 1% of the world population has ever experienced it. On the first day, we had orientation. We sat in the lounge as the crew members introduced themselves. Marine biologists, photographers, expedition experts. There were about 135 crew members for just 150 passengers. And people had come from all over the world. But we all had something in common. Curiosity. A desire to experience something new and rare. At one point, the crew asked us, what are you most excited to see? And the most common answer, of course, penguins. And I remember one of the photographers saying, I know everyone loves the penguins, but you will be amazed by the ice. It is out of this world. We set sail that evening, and after 2 days of nothing but wide open water, the Drake's Passage, I woke up and saw my first glimpse of Antarctica. Just the tips at first, peaks of ice, glaciers in the distance. It is just so hard to describe. The scale, the stillness, and it was so vast, remote. Everyone got so excited that we all gathered in the bridge, standing quietly, looking out. I felt a combination of excitement and calm, but also I felt so small and insignificant, and strangely at peace. And in that split moment, everything I had been carrying with me, the role, the title, the responsibilities, they all felt suddenly detached. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about what I needed to do next. I wasn't thinking about outcomes or expectations. I was just there, soaking it all in. My identity in that moment was just me on this journey, seeing something extraordinary, with a space to breathe and to just be present. And looking back, that moment was the first time that I felt, what it might actually be like to exist outside of the identity that I had built for so long. If my Antarctic trip helped me let go of my title, my Olympics experience showed me why that was so important. I've always loved the Olympics ever since I was a child. So going to the Olympics in person was always a dream. And during my sabbatical, we finally made it happen. We planned an entire week in Milan around the games. Figure skating, speed skating, ice hockey. As soon as we arrived, I could feel it. In the hotel lobby, people were talking about events that they had just seen. On the streets, you could hear so many languages. Groups of fans wearing team jackets and flags draped all over their shoulders and walking with pride towards venues. The city felt alive in a different way. Milan is known for high fashion, but during the Olympics, it became something else. It became the world's gathering place. Athletes, coaches, fans, media. There's this shared sense of excitement, like we are all part of something bigger and together. Our first event was the team figure skating competition. It was the medal night. I remember walking into the arena and just pause for a moment, looking around. Flags from different countries were waving across the stands. People were holding handmade signs with athletes' names, and music were playing loud, echoing throughout the space, and light strobes sweeping across the crowd. There were just constant hums of energy. I found my seat, but I couldn't sit still. I kept looking around, taking it all in. The US team was leading, but Japan was very close behind. And it all came down to the final event, the men's freestyle skating. As the athletes entered the ice, the music lowered. The announcer's voice carried through the arena. And suddenly, everything felt laser focused. Watching skaters line up, these are the best in the world, champions of their countries, athletes who had spent years, if not decades, training for this very moment. And many had already won international titles. And yet, none of that mattered at that very moment. They were starting from zero. There's no advantage, no guarantee. Just this one performance. That night, Ilya Melanin delivered an incredible performance. The arena was absolutely buzzing. The crowd reacted after each jump. We all leaned forward as he took off and then collectively released back into our chair when he landed. And after his final sequence, the entire place erupted. The US team had secured gold, and we left the arena that night. It felt electric. People were talking loudly, replaying the moments, celebrating, and there's just so much pride and excitement. And then a few days later, the men's freestyle single final. I was there. I remember holding my phone up as Ilya stepping onto the ice, trying to record his performance. The music started, and my whole body started to react. I gripped tightly on my phone, and my shoulders tensed up. My heart started pumping. And I remember thinking, I'm not even the one competing. And yet, I felt completely pulled into this moment. Every jump, every landing, and then the performance fell apart. And you could feel the energy in the arena just changed completely. It wasn't loud anymore. It was quieter, much heavier. Some people were still trying to cheer him up, trying to support, but underneath it, there was just such tension. I kept holding my phone up, but my hands weren't as steady anymore. It just felt that was the longest 4 minutes in my life. And when it all ended, there was a pause before the sympathetic reaction came. It was just so devastating. And walking out of the arena that night felt completely different. And over the next few days, I found myself kept thinking about that, replaying it in my head, and something started to become clear. We attach so much of our identity to outcomes, to titles. And when we attach those too tightly, it changes the experience. It takes away something, the joy, the reason we started, the love of the craft itself. And I realized not attaching your identity to a title or an outcome is incredibly important and incredibly hard. But it creates space to perform, to grow, to stay present. And in many ways, that insight helped me finalize something I had already been feeling, that it was time to move on, to graduate from Microsoft and begin something new. Because identity can't just be defined by what you achieve. It has to be something deeper. After I officially announced my decision to leave, I felt two things at the same time, liberated and nervous. Because now it is real. The identity I had carried for so long was no longer there. And what came next was entirely up to me. A few days after the announcement, the team organized a casual gathering. It was the first time I had been back on campus since my sabbatical. As I walked across campus, the buildings and the paths were exactly the same, but the feeling was different this time. There was a distance to it, like I was already seeing it from the outside. This had been home for 28 years, and it wouldn't be home anymore. As I got closer to the party, I slowed down. I remember looking through the window before walking in, trying to see who was already there. And the thought came across. Now that I'm no longer the leader of the team, will people show up? The gathering itself was small, but warm. I saw familiar faces. People smiled, came over, gave me hugs. We found a table and just started talking, catching up on the past few months. I shared stories from my travels, talk about what I was exploring next, and my podcast. Joy, we really miss you. Things are different here without you. How was Antarctica? What else have you been up to lately? And for a moment, it felt like we just came back from Christmas break, just reconnecting. At one point during the party, a small moment caught my attention. One of the admins pulled aside one of the leaders, reminding him that he had another appointment to go to. And I paused for a second, watching that interaction. Because for years, that had been my world. Everything's scheduled, everything's coordinated. That system no longer fits me. It wasn't a loss, but it was different. Just me now, making my own structure, deciding how to spend my own time. And that was both freeing and grounding. There was part of me that missed it, the rhythm, the predictability, the support system. But there was also a sense of being closer to the ground, more connected to the work, to the people, and the experience self. Letting go of my identity wasn't just about stepping away. It was about coming back to start again as a beginner and reminding myself this is exactly where I want to be. During my sabbatical, one of the biggest questions I kept coming back with, what should the next chapter actually look like? And for a long time, I knew I would have to make a choice. Either I would take another corporate job or I would build something more portfolio-based, advising, investing, boards, creative projects, a different kind of career. As I leaned more towards a portfolio career, I accepted I was walking into something much less defined. A path where people might quietly wonder, is this even a real career? I wondered that sometimes too. I had spent so many years operating in systems where success was clearly measured. Now suddenly, none of those things applied. And if this is my new chapter, what does success actually look like? How do I measure impact? And how do I define worth? And then maybe most importantly, who am I becoming through all of this? When I officially launched the podcast, the first 3 episodes went live, and I remember hesitating before sharing it publicly, especially on LinkedIn. For some reason, part of me still saw the podcast as separate from my professional identity, almost like it was something personal, something experimental. I remember sitting at my dining table late at night, drafting my announcement email. I had the podcast link already, and I kept staring at it. Should I include this? Would it seem too self-promotional? I must have gone back and forth on it for days and asked friends. And almost everyone said the same thing. Why wouldn't you include it? This is your work now. People would want to know. And eventually, I decided to include it in the email and on LinkedIn. And honestly, I had no idea what to expect. But over the next days and weeks, messages started coming in from former colleagues, old friends, people at Microsoft that I had never even met, and even strangers who discovered the podcast through the GeekWire article about my departure. One message especially stayed with me. It was from someone that I wasn't connected to on LinkedIn. She wrote, I found your podcast through your announcement. I listened to all 3 episodes during my Saturday morning walk. Thank you for being so authentic and vulnerable. It gave me permission to take risks and feel okay being scared. I remember sitting quietly for a moment after reading that message, and I read it again, choked it up a bit. Because at such an early stage of the podcast, those words meant so much. They reminded me that maybe impact looks different now. Maybe it didn't have to come from organizational scale. Maybe it could come from connection, from honesty. I realized I didn't need a title to have an identity. I could build a new one through creativity, through new ventures. And slowly, I started finding my voice again, not in the same arena, but in a new one. As I reflect on this chapter of reclaiming my identity, there are a few lessons that really stayed with me. The first, our identity and our title become so deeply intertwined, much more than we realize. It's not just about what we do. It's about how we measure our worth, how we believe others perceive us. And because of that, letting go becomes incredibly hard. Because the title slowly becomes part of how we define ourselves. The second lesson, when your identity is heavily tied to an institution or a company, eventually you will have to confront who you are without it. Whether that transition happens by choice or whether life forces it upon you someday. The earlier we start exploring that question, the more grounded we become. The third lesson is something I wish I had started earlier. building your own platform, your own voice, your own brand outside the company or an institution. Not for ego, not for self-promotion, but because institutions are temporary, titles are temporary, but your perspective, your experiences, and your voice, those can continue to evolve with you. And finally, I think this becomes even more important in the age of AI. As AI transforms all industries, jobs, and companies, the traditional ways we define ourselves professionally will shift, which means we all need something deeper, a sense of identity that doesn't depend on an institution's grants, a title, a platform, a voice. Instead, something uniquely human that belongs to us. And maybe that's where I find myself now, learning how to design my identity instead of inheriting it from an institution. And honestly, I still struggle with it sometimes. Investor, advisor, board member, podcaster, none of the labels fully capture who I am yet. And maybe that's okay, because this chapter isn't about having everything figured out. It's about having the courage to explore, to rebuild. So I'll leave you with this question. What is your identity outside of your job title? And if that title disappeared tomorrow, who would you be? This is Knowing Moments. I'm Joy Chick, and thank you for being here. If this episode resonates with you, please subscribe, rate, and review the Knowing Moments wherever you get your podcasts, and sign up for updates at theknowingmoments.com/email. And if someone came to my mind while listening, please share this podcast with them. You can share and tag us on your social posts. We're the Knowing Moments on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And send your feedback and suggestions for future episodes to joy@theknowingmoments.com as we continue this journey together.